Hello, everyone. Welcome to Triple Four Foxtrot. My name is Don Everett Smith Jr., and I am your host. We are with my father, Don Everett Smith Sr., once again to share stories from the past, share a couple of laughs, share a couple of jokes, and just talk about where we've been, where we've come from. Because honestly, our attitude is there's people out there that remember what it was like. Vintage nostalgia sites are all over the place, especially on Facebook and Instagram. And here's one more. So, Dad, how are you today?
Pretty good, aside from the smoking hole in my jaw when the dentist unplugging a tooth.
Oh, geez. Was it one of those things where he was standing on the armrests, bending down with rusty pliers in there, and then just twist, turn, yank, that kind of thing?
Pretty close. It was grueling. In fact, he usually has a lady helping him today. That day or Friday, he had a young man helping him. And he was actually supporting this side of my jaw while the dentist was bearing down trying to get the tooth out. It took a better part of an hour. He kept having to grind it and break it. And
Oh, geez.
he finally took it out in pieces. But it's mostly out now. I see a piece of it sticking up through the gum there that I'll have to. But other than that, I'm finer than frog hair.
Hey, well, here's the other thing, though. Whenever there's a dentist, then guys with hard hats come walking through. It's going to be a long day.
Pretty much. When we get further down the line, I've got some dentist stories for sure.
Then we'll start telling Seinfeld dentist jokes. What do you call a guy who flunked out of medical school? A dentist.
I don't know.
We'll become anti-dentites.
Oh, I've got some doctor stories too, so I don't want to lean on them too hard.
Well, I'll tell you this, though. There were a couple of dentists I was thinking about visiting here. And I'm not going to name names, but the dentist, one of my coworkers, said, "Hey, I want to show you something." I had signed up to go visit that very dentist. And then she says, "Take a look at this." And she showed me her phone, and it was a piece of metal about this long. And she goes, "Oh, I just pulled that. They pulled that out. They left that in my husband's jaw." And I was like, I won't be going there. So,
I had one of those happen too.
oh,
But at any rate,
I think I'm at a point where I'll just let the things rot out of my head. And then when that all happens, I'll go in and get bridge work or something.
now you're talking. It's cheaper to build an actual bridge, actually. But
And to actually do that.
he keeps talking about doing a bridge. He's got another tooth to pull. He's talking about doing a bridge, and so he gave me the price. So I asked him, "Are you going to drive the getaway car for me?" Because it's just astronomical.
What it's going to cost to do something like that. So, real quick, I know today we wanted to talk about where we got the name 444 Foxtrot.
Yeah.
And I wanted to just talk very little about that because I know that you've got this whole amazing story that you wanted to share. And but I wanted to just talk about why Foxtrot means so much to both of us and why it's such an awesome thing. And I wanted to see if you could share a little bit about today. Where did the name come from?
Well, the name came from my days as a student pilot when I was taking flying lessons to try to overcome my fear of flying. So it wasn't just fear of flying. It was a terror of airplanes because when I was a kid, I saw one crash at an air show, crashed and exploded right in front of us. And I was just terrified. And I had nightmares for weeks afterward. I don't recall the nightmares, but my mom told me that I'd wake up every night screaming. But
Jeez.
so anyway, I was afraid every time I heard an airplane flying outside, flying over the house. We were living in what's now Chesapeake, Virginia, and it's a huge military area with Norfolk Naval Air Station, Oceana Naval Air Station,
Right.
Langley Air Force Base, not to mention the civilian airport. So there was a lot of air traffic around, and it kept me busy watching those planes to make sure they were going to make it past there. If it wasn't heading my way, then I could just go about my business. But if it was heading my way, I would watch it until they got by. So anyway, that's sometimes after I'd taken my flying lessons, and that's a story. I mean, but how we got the name is a separate story because some years later I started gaming, In my adult life, I think you might have been born when I started gaming or a toddler, but I played this game like Fighter Ace, and you needed a handle. So I started thinking that, well, you had 444 Foxtrot with the play. Here, I'll show.
Mhm.
I got my logbook here. I'll show you. On my third lesson, I started flying this plane here. And if I can hold it still long enough, it's the registration number is November 644 Foxtrot. And I don't know if do I have it in focus? I can't tell.
There it is. I can see it right now.
And you see above it the 68622 Sierra.
Right.
But I always thought the instructors did when you're on an airport that doesn't have a control tower, just a little general aviation airport, you have a unicom. And all the unicoms in the area use the same frequency. So when you made your announcement, when you were maneuvering near the airport, you would call out the name of that airport and what you were doing. And so if you're entering the pattern downwind, you'd say, "This is 444 Foxtrot at Portsmouth entering pattern downwind." And to me, when you said 444 Foxtrot, man, that sounded like you were flying a Spitfire, or maybe you were diving a P-51 Mustang under the Eiffel Tower inverted at night. The guy can dream, Caney.
True.
But I just thought it was a cool sounding name, even though I hated the airplane. And two reasons I hated that airplane is, one, it was red. And that's why we're wearing red, because 444 Foxtrot was red. And the plane that I saw crash during the air show back in Norfolk, Virginia, it was bright red too.
Oh, wow.
So I didn't like red airplanes to start with. And the other reason is when you flew it, even on the calmest day when there was no air, it still crabbed. So to go into a straight line, you'd have to either put in right trim or stand on the rudder pedal to get the plane
Right.
in a straight line. And even then, when it's crabbing, the plane, it's not like this. It turns to the side like this, but it's still going straight. And you see that a lot, in crosswinds, you'll see planes crabbing as they're coming in for landing, and just before they touch down, they'll straighten up. So I had a lot of fun gaming, and that generated a few stories, a lot of laughs. I was part of a squadron, and the squadron, we had upwards of 60 people in it. It was called TWC, or the Wrecking Crew. Everybody had call sign, and mine was 444 Foxtrot. So it was a lot of fun, a lot of laughs, and our squadron leader was actually a pilot for Qantas, and he flew Boeing 767s between Sydney, Australia, Tokyo in real life.
Wow.
And he was one of the funniest guys you'd ever meet. He was so hilarious. I remember we were flying this mission. He used to love to get into a Lancaster, which a Lancaster was the heaviest hauler of World War II. And I would go along with him, and we'd fill these Lancasters up with 100-pound bombs. And of course, this was all virtual. We would head out low level cross country to the enemy airport, and we'd just fly down the runway and just lay these eggs on the enemy's runway and just totally destroy the runway. So, and we were doing it one time. We were flying to a Japanese airport, and they had a rudimentary radar. And so you could see the enemy planes dots. They were just dots. You couldn't really tell what they were, but you had a pretty good idea when you see a swarm of them over the enemy airfield that they're enemy planes. And he's flying along, and I'm flying wings, so he's in charge. And I'm thinking,
right.
Look at all those enemy planes up there. I hope he's paying attention. And he flew on, and we're getting closer and closer. And these aren't bogeys; these are bandits, and we're about to get jumped by a whole bunch of zeros.
Oh no!
He gets on the radio and says, or the voice comm, and he says, "Oh, looks like a bit of a problem there." And I said, you have an amazing grasp of the bleeding obvious. And sure enough, here come the Zeros, and they just shot us down. So we had to find some other fun. We had to fly something else and do something else. But anyway, that's where the name basically came from. It came from my days as a student pilot, flying a plane I didn't like, but I loved the call sign. 444 Foxtrot. Man, that sounded so macho.
Well, I wanted to tell you, when you presented me with the idea of 444 Foxtrot, it took me back, ironically, back to when I was a kid and we were living in Portsmouth, Virginia.
Okay.
And I remember it was Channel 27. Of course, it's not that anymore. Yeah. I think it's now WGNT or something like that.
Oh, really? I did not know that.
And WYAH was then owned by the 700 Club and Christian Broadcasting Network at the time. And they would air over and over again the old 1960s Batman. And they would also air Zorro. And I wanted to show you this. This was something that I bought online.
Okay, cool. I think I bought a couple of those for you when you were little.
You did. Now, what this is that this is an updated mold of this. So this is not one of those, but it is an updated mold, and it's a Mego Batman figure. And I remember being 2 years old, throwing this up in the air and trying to catch it in our Ashburn House home. Now, the other thing, this is not one of my favorites, but you're kind of limited on your Zorro toys. But this is Zorro. And what is interesting about Zorro, let's see if I can get him to use his whip. Now, what is interesting about Zorro, and I'm pretty sure that I was watching the old, the old Zorro episodes that had Guy Williams starring as Zorro. That was very big, that Disney produced. And I remember running around with a black cowboy hat, a white shirt, black pants, and black cowboy boots going, I'm Zorro. And I'd run around the house doing that. Now, as I got older, one of the things that I learned was that when Bob Kane and another gentleman by the name of Bill Finger, who's just recently gotten the credit for his interest in Batman, Bob Kane was really inspired by the old 1920s Zorro movie. The idea of making Batman a rich man who lived up above a cave where he had all of his gadgets and other stuff, that's strictly taken from Zorro. And the thing is that Zorro was what they call a pulp hero. And he was created back in 1916, 17, or 18. I think it might have been 18, because he was created by this guy by the name of Johnston McCulley, who came up with this idea, and he wrote a story called The Curse of Capistrano, which featured Zorro. Now, why am I talking all about Zorro and Batman? Well, two things. Number one, Zorro in Spanish means fox. And when you look at the type of breeds of foxes that are type of breeds of bats out there, there's actually something called the fox bat. And it looks like basically a dog's head on a bat's body, and it has a red neck. And we say this as guys wearing red necks from being from Virginia, and our family coming from North Carolina, the Appalachian portions of it. And the thing is that foxes and bats, and especially in this type of situation, are all interlinked together. And what's also ironic about it is the first time Bob Kane created Batman, he created Batman as a guy in a red costume with black boots, a black simple domino mask, kind of what Robin wore, and a pair of black wings where he's swinging across. Well, a guy by the name of Bill Finger said, that's all well and good, but why don't we give him the pointy ears, make his costume dark and gray? Instead of giving him a pair of wings, give him a cape. And that's why we have what Batman looks like today. And that's where all of the things. So for me, foxes, bats, superheroes, pulp heroes, and the pulp characters, while they still existed at the same time of comic books, pulp and comic books from the 20s, 30s, 40s, and 50s borrowed a lot from each other. And then in the 60s, pulp started going the way, especially with television becoming what it was. And then by the 70s and 80s, pulps were just kind of like a subgenre of action books, horror books, fantasy books, science fiction books. And in the last few years, with there being the resurgence of public domain characters that there is a huge underground market for them, where people are going back to these old characters. And some of the characters, even the Curse of Capistrano, that Zorro book is actually in the public domain now. So people are going back and doing a lot with that. So this is a long way of saying that Fox, Bats, comics, pulp, all of that are all together. And some of my greatest joys in life were where I wrote a Zorro story for the very awesome people at Bold Venture Comics, Bold Venture Press, who had a really great story, or had a really great book called The Continuing Adventures of Zorro. And I wish I had a copy right here because I'd show it to you. But one of my stories made it in there, and it was Zorro versus a werewolf. And that was what I had. Yeah. One of my dearest friends in the world, Michael Gracia, drew the artwork for it. And so I was able to get that out. And it was just, like I said, and then when this opportunity came and you said, let's call it 444 Foxtrot, I was like, we're back to the beginning. It's a weird circle thing for me.
You learn something new every day, So I always like the history, words, and where things originate. In fact, that was a little bit of a hobby of mine, is studying word origins and everything. But can I tell you just a little short Zorro story?
Sure.
After I retired, just find something to do. I was working for Alamo rental cars at the local airport. And so I had this badge on it, and everything, that I would go to McDonald's at lunch sometimes. And what I'd do is I would just, they ask you your name. They'd write your name on your ticket, which I thought was ridiculous since they had a number on it that was like inches high. I would give them the same name as the person in front of me. If his name was George, then my name would be George. If it was Fred,
that's awesome.
Fred. If it was Louise, then my name was Louise.
Yeah.
Anyway, I had a little change up of this once, and I was in the line, and the girl asked me my name. And so I said, Don Diego Alhambra de la Vega. And she said, how do you spell that? And I said, Zorro. And which is really, I'm a student of Zorro. That's actually a combination of Zorro's name and his dad's name. But I always thought that sounded cooler. Anyway, I said Zorro. She said, what? I said, well, you can just use the Don part, D-O-N. I had a lot of fun with that. I mean, I said I wore the badge, and that's because once I went to McDonald's and she asked me my name, and I just held my shirt out. And so she writes down Alamo.
Now, Don Alamo sounds like a great name.
Well, turnover at McDonald's, but there was a lady there that was training her, and she was there for a long time. And every time I'd go in after that, she'd say, what can I get for you, Alamo?
That's awesome. I found a picture of it. Let me see if I can get that up.
Yeah, the guy, all right. Yeah.
Yeah, that's my particular book. And you can see the great Audrey Puente. I say her name wrong all the time. Audrey Parente, which is coming in backwards. She is the editor, and a couple of my things have appeared in Bold Venture Press. I also wrote my own take of a Doctor Who story and my own take of a Superman story, using the character Dr. Omega, which is a public domain character, and a superhero named the American Crusader, which is also a public domain character. So that's one of my reasons for doing this. And like I said, they all come back together at some point.
Yeah.
It's just fun for stuff like that. How to explain your story about you going by the name of Zorro and working and doing all that stuff? Your wacky sense of humor explains where I get my wacky sense of humor from.
I think it's wacky, but
yeah,
I've always considered me at work to have a certain artistic flair, and a lot of artists work in oil or clay or whatever. Medium was aggravation. I could just aggravate the dickens out of the people at work, and
Yeah,
I had a real gift for aggravation, but I had a lot of fun with it.
me too. We should compare ourselves. There's that. So we can talk about the time how before you get too on your high horse, we can talk about the time how when the family, all of us were traveling, and you passed the biggest pig truck I've ever seen and rolled down mom's window right by it. So
Yeah, she was asleep at the time.
oh, that was great. Just a big gust of pig fart air just hit her right in the face, and you just hear this. Ah!
Woke her up in a real hurry, didn't I?
Yeah, that's what we should do. The Foxtrot alarm clock.
Yeah.
Releases sewer air. So,
yeah.
Well, Dad, I think we've done enough horrifying of our friends and family to talk about where this came from. So the next time we're gonna, why don't we tell you the real, if you can retell the real story of the airplane experience that was horrified by you, especially in the Foxtrot. I think people would be very interested in that.
Okay, take a while. That was a story that spanned some 23 years almost.
Right. So,
yeah.
And in that one, we're definitely going to have to see if we can get some pictures, because we think we found the picture of the airplane in the article about that very explosion when we were doing some research on this. So
I don't remember a picture of it, but I remember some articles.
Yeah.
Found. I didn't find any. I looked and I couldn't find anything, but that would be cool if you find something about it.
Yeah. All right. Well, everybody, we just want to take a moment and say thank you very much for joining us today. If you like what you heard, please click like and subscribe. We are a new channel and we are trying to make our name out there. And if you have anything you'd like for us to talk about or what have you, put it down in the comment box. We read all our comments. We read all our emails, and we are happy to answer. So anyway,
and this is a legacy project. I'm just leaving some stories for prosperity. And originally I was just going to write them, but then I decided, well, why not tape them?
Makes total sense.
Private tape, and I thought, well, I don't know. I tell people the stories, and people seem to go, well, okay. A neat story, and so I just well, let's invite some people to get in on it. Maybe understand. If you got any stories about growing up or whatever your history, then mention it in the comments.
So, well, with that said, everybody, thank you so much for joining us. Have a great day and take care.
Thank you all.